expertise in different disciplines.
Yeah.
But I think the work she's doing at the Ministry of Gender, Children, and Social Protection should not have been the work she's supposed
So
to
it's
do.
misplaced
Yes,
at this
I
point.
don't think so. And disclaimer, I don't go against her because she's a female, and no, I'm not against her. She has competence in different areas. Now, realistically, from January to October in 2024, statistically there were 2,759. I know the fact checkers are listening because the last time they also listened and they said there were some other things that I said.
That you say, okay.
So let them listen well because these are statistics. So I hope they will listen. From January to October in 2024, there were 2,759 to the Ministry of Gender. 8.7, which constitute 1,902 accounts for cases that occur in Monserrado County. Wow. Yes, of course. The number is so high, and the average monthly incidence rate, that means every month from January to October, how many cases were reported? 279 cases were reported. We already get the average monthly cases that are reported. Now let's know the average daily cases or cases that were reported. Now, based on the incidents per month, the average case per day, 9 rape cases were reported every day from January to October of 2024. Something is not right here. Previously, we have argued that the previous government was not acting. Now, there were the first report, Section Gender-Based Violence report on previous George Manneh Weah. It was lower than this. It was around 1,000. But the first one on our President Fallow, Joseph Yeman Poakai, it goes up to 2,759. There's a variance. Wow. It means the government isn't kind of a strategic roadmap to addressing sexual and gender-based violence, like the previous government did on bringing the national sexual and gender-based violence roadmap. In that roadmap, it exclusively defines what role stakeholders in community are supposed to play and how much is a portion for community actors to address sexual and gender-based violence. But when you politicize the issue of social problem, it becomes a problem for the very women and children and girls who are supposed to have access to RICO services and justice. So I can tell you, based on these statistics, the current Ministry of Gender, Children, and Social Protection needs to add up. They need to double up to the work they're doing. That's what I can tell you.
Minister Wemi, right? That's her name.
That's her name.
Okay.
Of course, even with the West African Democracy Radio quoted her that Liberia Ministry of Gender decries rise in sexual violence. We still have the article. There's a problem, a couple of problems. So who are the people reporting rape cases across the country? You don't know them. These are people who may have gone into campaign processes to say vote for Bwaka, vote for Bwaka.
Exactly.
So you just tell them and say, okay, the person that gender officer for Mangibi can't. No, that's not how to do these things. They must go through the proper training. Do they know about confidentiality? Do they know how to protect victims and survivors of sexual and gender-based violence? The last time the very Minister of Gender, Children, and Social Protection, if I lie on her knee, should move from on me. The Minister of Gender, Children, and Social Protection, who's supposed to be protecting the image and privacy of a victim and survivor of domestic violence, was the same person who posted a child prostitute
exactly
in Mangibi County, Kakata.
And I saw that video.
Yeah, she sat in her office.
Seriously,
what are you talking? That is what the both people call re-victimization of victims.
You are exposing this person that you're supposed to protect.
So then there's a question: what is the role that the Minister of Gender, Children Protection is playing? What role is she playing? So, I mean, we have a very critical problem that we all have to come together and see how best. The minister does not see the fight against rape as political fight. She should see it as a social fight, and that brings everyone collectively together to ensure that we engage stakeholders and to work together. Or else if you think that sedition are telling the Liberian people rape plenty,
You have a
then
lot of young girls to be.
yeah, then I mean that's a problem. Rape not CDC Benin, rape not Unity Party Benin. Rape is a social crime, it's a social crisis. So Alexa, that's what I can tell you.
The country, yeah.
And you see, each time I'm talking about these things, my voice
Yes.
goes up because
Yes.
it is quite frustrating.
It is. It
See?
is. And I think for me, what baffles me a lot is the fact that some of the ministers now let's forget about young people who are involved,
Mhm,
but some of the ministers today,
Mhm.
some of the directors today,
mhm.
if you go back to 2-3 years back, a lot of them they have records of posting, or resharing
Mhm.
some of your reports
Of course.
exactly. And today, a lot of them are actually quiet.
Mhm.
Like it seems like no one is being raped in Liberia. It seems like no one is really struggling when it comes to some of the different challenges people faced before.
Mhm.
So today everything is really okay in Liberia. Everything seems to be okay based on the image they're trying to present. Now it goes back to the president. Like I remember we had George Weah as Liberia's president. He met you guys,
Mhm.
a couple of times, and there were dialogues. You had different discussions. You provided some recommendations, and I think that's one of the reasons the roadmap was birthed.
Mhm.
And you had to work closely
Mhm.
with the Ministry of Gender.
Mhm.
So now we have Joseph Boakai as Liberia's president. And I like the fact where you said this should not be a political, work.
Mhm.
And because this is about everybody, even a person who is a Unity Party member, of course,
Mhm.
you will have your kid
Yeah.
to be raped. You can never say it. There are people who are seditious. There are people who are from the ANC. There are people who are from Liberty Party. They have all had cases of rape, within their communities, or they've had maybe one of their family members
Mhm.
or church members, some way, someone connected to you, whether you United Party, you CDC, wherever you're from.
Mhm.
So this should be a collective fight.
Mhm.
And the fact that we have Joseph, I don't want to be political, but we have Joseph Boakai as Liberia's president. And yesterday, a lot of them said George Weah did not do what he should have done
Mhm.
as Liberia's president.
Mhm.
And I'm sure when they spoke in that tone, they did not just limit it to one sector in our country, but they said that holistically, that everything in the country was not being done properly. Maybe the laws of our country, they were not respected and all that. Because if you are respecting the law, you're also talking about protecting victims and survivors.
Mhm.
Because if someone is going to rape a young girl,
Yes.
that person will be found guilty at the end of the day, and that person will be able to serve their time in prison or in jail if they're found guilty.
Mhm.
But now we have Joseph Boakai as Liberia's president. Has there been any moment where he has reached out, or you guys have reached out to talk about these different cases? Imagine 2,759,
Mhm.
2024 January to October.
Mhm.
That's a huge number.
Very huge.
So has there been any call for dialogue?
No, there hasn't been any call for dialogue, but I think we are demanding and asking the government to redeclare rape a national emergency. They have to redeclare because the former president declared.
Yeah.
And of course, in try his best, there were problems.
Mhm.
I am not sitting here to think
Say
that
everything was
everything was very
100%,
butter, but
right.
there were problems on ex-president George Manuel Weah.
Mhm.
And if these problems still exist above what had existed
Before,
during President George
yeah.
Manuel Weah time, then this president must redeclare rape a national emergency and set a clear manifesto roadmap on how the arrest agenda is going to deal with sexual and gender-based violence. If you read the arrest agenda, it has my new portion that talks about LGBTV, which is not well
beautifully
positioned.
written.
Yeah, which is not well positioned. You should tell Liberia as a country, the second most reported crime that I have experienced in Liberia is rape. The first most reported one are corruption. So what we need to do, we need to utilize response mechanism that deals with sexual and gender-based violence in community, and we also need to utilize these response mechanism at a national framework level. We have a arrest agenda. Let's be able to insert comments and recommendations from the various stakeholders, journalists like you, activists like me, to ensure that the arrest agenda becomes inclusive to dealing with rape. But go read the arrest agenda. My new portion talks about sexual and gender-based violence, which is a betrayal to the existence of women and children across this country?
I don't know. Sometimes I'm at a loss for words and
Yeah.
I'm speechless. And the reason is very simple because for me, I think I take to people who mean what they say.
Mm.
Right. So if you had, I still don't want to be political, but again, we have to reference it.
Mm.
If you had campaigned 100% on the fact that you're going to rescue Liberia, and for me, I'm not sure that rescue was just about one sector. No, it was about rescuing the entire
Mm.
Liberia, the entire country, the 15 political subdivisions of our country. You talked about all of those different things, some of the issues women faced, some of the issues, ordinary people faced back in the day, and now you're here. So if you had already presented a rescue message to Liberians,
Mhm.
I'm sure a lot of people had different expectations. For example, mothers whose daughters and boys were being abused, to some extent, boys were being sodomized, and you had young girls to be raped. I'm sure a lot of them were like, hey, since we have Joseph Boakai telling us that he's going to rescue the country, I think we need to try another option. So let's go for him. We're sure our girls will be protected. We're sure our women will be protected, right? So that's another part of it, because you saw a lot of women. And now that we're here, and just going back to 2,759, just 2024, I'm sure this is a huge disappointment to a lot of Liberian women and a lot of Liberian young girls and boys who had, talked about, hey, let's support this government. So do you think, we're going to have rape to be declared a national emergency? Do you think that's going to happen?
It is
Honestly.
it is almost impossible because the government doesn't have a clear priority to, understanding that rape is a social menace, to understand that rape takes, away the value of a girl child and expose her to vulnerability in our society. So it's almost impossible that the government of Liberia would be able to prioritize and redeclare rape a national emergency. But it is our demand and hope that this government must focus on, presenting to the Liberian people a specific roadmap.
Mhm.
Look, policy, advocacy, activism go beyond, the regular outburst,
Mhm.
talking whole day. No, it is about identifying the problem and key framing strategies and to ensure that there is sustainable, based on the question you just which we're talking about,
Yeah.
there should be sustainable
Sustainable.
outcome and advocacy of the
Yes,
things we want.
exactly.
So it's nearly impossible, but we're hoping. I mean, we're in 2025.
Yeah, when I reach that,
Yeah.
that's all hoping you'll go.
Yeah, I just hope. Any person as you manage your expectation, even when people are being raped in West Point,
This is not
when you don't
supposed
get
to be
justice,
funny.
you should manage your expectations. So,
Wow.
yeah. It may sound
Wow.
political, and which is the realistic thing
Of
about that.
course, when people make some of the different fights political, I think it needs to have that reaction, because you should know that it shouldn't be political. But the fact that you have made it political,
Yeah.
you should do what you're supposed to do. If it is about political relevance and whatever you're going to call that, where it is on you. But I think it has to be done the way it has to be done.
Think about 1 minute. Think about the National Independent Commission on Human Rights.
Yeah,
You read the report. The report said
that was a very bad report.
Yeah, there's high increase in human rights violation across this country.
And what has been done?
Nothing.
You're a human rights defender too.
I know, but for me, I get financial resources. I get all the expertise.
But
I know
you
how
need
to
support
I know how to
financially.
mobilize. I know how to talk to stakeholders. I know how to, streamline policy. I know how to, simplify advocacy messaging so that the very layman can know that this problem is a problem. But when it comes to the implementation, look, we need resources in this country to have sustainable implementation. Because if there's no resources, then
They're just
mindset is
going
a
to
problem.
talk, yeah,
You're gonna
and
be
talk
talking.
and talk.
But then it's gonna take up more than 6 years to have this entire, mindset being shifted. Yeah.
Wow. And then I think partnership is very important. And
Mhm.
now that USAID is not here, It is a lot of work,
Mhm.
a lot of challenge right now. The challenges are really huge because before you had them supporting some of these different
Yeah.
initiatives and all
Mhm.
that, so they had to put their money to it. But now that you have the government, and I like the fact you talked about spending about 2 million plus on the
Mhm.
just ended senatorial by-election in Nima County,
Mhm.
and the government should be able to manage
Mhm.
right now. They can say cut down costs,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's should be something the government should focus on right now,
Mhm.
because right now you don't have too much support from out there, so
Mhm.
you're just working basically within what you have domestically.
Mhm.
So if you have a responsible and sensible government, I think we should think in that direction, because now you're talking about, hey, what can we put towards fighting sexual violence? What can we put towards maybe reducing ritualistic or mysterious deaths in Liberia?
Mhm.
Because in as much as we're saying, hey, we need the government to do what they're supposed to do, money
Mhm.
is involved.
Yeah.
So you need to have small portion.
Uh,
For example, $50 is going on the side, you have $20 on the side.
mhm.
That direction, I think that's one of the questions to be asked.
Mhm.
Also, we're discussing how can we have sustainable advocacy, not just sustainable but effective.
Mhm.
And now that we're here and we have the country looking the other day, if you're seeing me, you're seeing my
Mhm.
or like this, right?
Mhm.
So we don't have time now.
Mhm.
In your own week with taxes, no money. Let's just
Mhm.
say it that way, no money
Mhm.
to help empower your initiative, because you have to go all over Liberia, not just in Liberia. And if you're going to have a team of young people, it is not mostly paying them, but you need transportation, you need to eat, you just need money to work on what you're working on. If you're putting together to get reports, and I
Mhm.
can say that for free because you have to move from one end to another.
Mhm.
So what do you think we should do? I mean, media, practitioners, advocates, government, to have this sustainable advocacy, in as much as poor implementation is here. Even though we try so much to say, hey, do not. We have the laws on the book. The government has the influence to put money into these things to empower advocates and all that across the country. But we do together sustainable in the presence of poor implementation.
So I want to say it is about time that policy actors
Mhm.
should making the opportunity of local stakeholders,
Mhm.
from participating in policy decision making. When you exclude the woman from West Point, when you exclude the woman from Nikutan or the man from Clareton,
Mhm.
it means you do not want him to know how can he solve his problem at community level. But you just go bring some kind of 155 pages. You say this is policy on sexual and gender-based violence. And did you bring the lower class people to the table? Did you bring the
Exactly.
very illiterates? Did you bring our citizens across the table? So we should be thinking about, you know, forming a very strong coalition between activists and policy actors. And these people come together, the outcome of policy implementation can be very strong because people get to be accountable of their roles and positions. Now, let's say, for instance, we say we have this whole policy engagement section in gender-based violence.
Mhm.
In terms of media engagement and radio and community, mobilization,
Mhm.
we come, we say, okay, Alexis, are you? You say, yes, that me, Alexis, I'm going to do that. Mind you, if that policy fail, who will hold? We hold
Told
you
me.
because you're accountable and initially you agree
Yeah.
fundings are given, you agree that you now implement. But every time government is a progenitor of policy and they become the implementer of the very policy,
Exactly.
when those policies fail, we always go to the street to say we want justice, we want this.
And it's the same people. You're right.
So it is about time the very local people who are the most oppressed, not the most privileged of the spoil system, the most oppressed can come on policy table and talk about these things. If that Kisi the woman can speak, let the woman speak her Kisi.
Yeah.
If that Loma she can speak, she can speak Loma and tell us say how we all can generally achieve this together, but don't exclude these people. So I think that is part of the recommendation. And the second part about this whole recommendation is that we should stop, making politics out of social issues.
Mhm.
We agree that people get privilege along the way and get employed in government, but those who are into activism or civil society organization, and if those people are critiquing government, of course it will always happen. People will be criticized for being,
Exactly.
anti-government. But at
Exactly.
least let's listen to what these people have to say, so we all can work together and stop the extreme politicization of social problems in Liberia.
Well, Tatus, I guess that's you see what REC can do.
Mhm.
Because I think REC will not be able to take calls because
Yes.
else they have to be here. It's like 3 already, so minutes after 3. But we've had a good time here, and I'm hoping to have Tatus back next time.
Good.
Because we need to have these different discussions, and I think we also need to get on the back of the current gender minister. We don't have anything against her personally. I don't know her personally.
Mhm.
I don't have any problem with her personally, but I think when it comes to working in the interest of Liberians, it is important to have those people to understand exactly what they need to do.
Mhm.
So if she's unable to do her work as gender minister,
Mhm.
it is now late to resign, and you're doing that to protect your image
Mhm.
as well as to give someone who understands the
Mhm.
job to do what you're supposed to do for the women, girls, and children of Liberia. It is important. And this is not because we hate you. No, we don't hate you. It is for Liberia. And I also think the president, Mr. Joseph Boakai, he has to be very, very serious in, making sure the people he has
Mhm.
to do the job are qualified enough in that capacity.
Mhm.
Okay, we're not
Mhm.
saying, oh, she's not qualified, didn't know. Maybe she can do something else,
Yes.
and she's able to do something else. But we're discussing in a certain capacity. If a person is not able, do not have them there because maybe they supported you politically. No, that want your own people to be there.
Mhm.
Have someone who understands the role.
Mhm.
Have someone who knows exactly how to run the ministry. So it is important. Tatus,
Yeah.
what do you have to say to Liberians before we let you go? Your
No,
parting
so
comment.
I would tell Liberian people to ensure that they hold this government accountable, because the government came on the agenda of rescuing this country.
Exactly.
It is the right of the Liberian people to hold this very government accountable to things that have not been implemented. We in 2025, 2024 fini, that 2025 we're in.
And we're in April.
We cannot be holding to hopes and aspiration that there's going to be a better day when you, women, and children are going to bed hungry. It is about time we hold this government accountable. And by holding this government accountable, we must also hold ourselves accountable to initiatives that we want to delve into, especially initiative that centers around sexual and gender-based violence, access to sexual and reproductive health rights, and so forth. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tatus. We've had a good time with you here. And we're already out of time. So unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to take calls from you. We're like already 5 minutes above our usual time. But we've had a good time here talking about all of these different issues in Liberia. And I hope we can have a lot of you on board. Do not say, oh, African and now on risk. You can also start it yourself, right? You don't have to wait for someone with a labeled a title, an advocate before now. Hold the government accountable and hold yourself accountable as well if you have, been passionate enough to have an initiative to protecting the girls and women of our country. But we've had a good time here on today's edition of Women Spotlight. My name is Princess Alexa Venjakoli, and of course we're back here, another time with another great edition of Women Spotlight. Do have yourselves a pleasant time.
Them bring development and better education. Our lands are fertile, no food on the land. Our children, we're pushing into bed.